I can't thank you enough for coming on and coming in. Like, really, thank you very much, and having a chat and sharing a little bit about your story. And I suppose that's probably a good place to start. How long are you sober now for?
So my sobriety birthday is the 27th of August 2021.
Okay.
So yeah, August last year I turned 2 years. 2 years sober.
2 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, everybody deserves a medal.
Yeah, I know.
That does it. It's incredible.
It is.
Yeah. And do you, like, I suppose as a starting point, I suppose going back to the beginning would be a good place.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I mean, obviously it can be quite a dark place to revisit for lots of us, but what was the catalyst to kind of, making that change, taking that step?
In all honesty, it can sound quite harsh or as you said, dark, but it got to a point where I had two roads, and my two roads were either immediate death or all the kind of drugs and alcohol around me, consume all of those and kind of come to a demise through that. It was either at my own hands or from drugs and alcohol, and I only saw those two paths. I felt consumed by it. I remember sitting on my bed and just thinking there was no other way of living. I felt so trapped by it because it was like, I wanted to stop but I couldn't, and other days I wanted to control it but I couldn't, and it just felt like everything was falling apart around me, and I just felt so consumed by it. And then really the kind of my saving grace from that was my mum, who's 20 years in recovery. I grew up in AA, but still I grew up in recovery. Sorry. But I grew up in recovery, but I just, like, with family members around me like that, but I didn't like compute. I was so desperate to get away from what my parents were like as when I was a child. I was like, no, I can't be like that, I'll never be like that. And then I called my mum and just said, I need help, and she helped me, and it was then that I started to realise that there is another path, and that I'm not alone, and that I can have a life that isn't self-destruct mode 24/7. But yeah, it took a long time to get there, but I think that was my kind of real real bottom, real kind of nowhere left to run, nowhere left to go kind of thing.
Yeah, it's, we hear about it, sort of that point of defeat, maybe, surrender, defeat, accepting that something needs to change, that there's a problem, however you want to put it. And it's so sad to hear how often, for so many people, that has to get to such an extreme place. you know, for them to kind of, it's almost the lucky ones that even kind of are able to kind of say, look, I need to change and reach out for help.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and to really want to do it.
That's it, isn't it? It's the, like, I'm not, yeah, it's that deep down it's a want, but for me it didn't feel like a want. It felt like a desperate need, you know, for something else to kind of, yeah, guide me and kind of, yeah, get me away from that living hell, basically. But I think, like you were saying, like, it is sad that some people have to, you know, like I did, you have to get to a place of such kind of misery and pain and disaster that but I think it's also really important to, you know, realise that on the outside, you know, everybody's life can look very different, but it's about, for me, I believe it's about internally where you're at. So, like, you know, someone can be in a gold mansion with all the money in the world and you know, have everything at their disposal that they may desire or need or want, and you can have someone, you know, street homeless who has absolutely nothing, and they can still come to the same point of that internal, like, defeat, of that internal, you know, desperate unhappiness.
Yeah.
It's less about kind of, for me, I believe it's, you know, it's less about kind of what's around you, it's about what's inside you. But obviously, you know, I'm coming from a place where I did have, you know, a job still, clinging on by the fingernails, but, you know, I did have a job. I, you know, was in a shared house, and so for me to say that, I think, you know, might be a bit unknowing, but I think that, you know, it's an internal feeling.
Yeah.
You know?
Just to touch on I like how you put that desperate unhappiness. You know, I know exactly what you mean, and that sense of just being so totally lost, and, you know, just without any sense of, you know, who you are, a kind of a sense of purpose or meaning or connection, or just nothing good. And then there's the depression and the kind of, you know, in some cases, like, just suicidal ideation, you know, just waking up with it and going to bed with it, and doing that day in, day out, and medicating that or managing that in the only kind of way you know how, you know, through drinking drugs. And obviously, as we know, by doing that, only makes it worse. And so you get stuck in this extremely dangerous, very life-threatening cycle of behaviour, and it originates, you know, and it's sort. And I think that sometimes that's why treatment is so effective, because it, you know, you kind of try and get back to what the source was at the beginning, and over a period of time it can get a little bit faded and a little bit lost, you know, as it's just cemented down through the behaviour. You know.
Yeah, definitely. That kind of, because, you know, we'd have those difficult feelings, those uncomfortable situations we'd end up in, or scenarios or anything, and like you said, you know, my immediate, you know, reaction was just like medicate it. And for me, that was, you know, at the time, what I thought was the right thing for me was drinking drugs. And then it, you know, as it goes on, it becomes this coping mechanism, but then it becomes just second nature. Like you don't think, you know, I could stub my toe and I'll be like, oh, that's so painful. Where's my coping mechanism? You know, and that sounds really silly or kind of like, I don't know, a bit ridiculous, but that's where my head was, that it was like, you know, anything small, anything massive, it would be solved by drinking drugs. But, you know, like you said, all that does is just cover up the problems and just push them further down. And then, yeah, I think for me eventually it got to a point where the drinking drugs actually stopped working, to where, you know, they were destroying my life around me externally. They were destroying my, you know, physically, internally and externally, but it was that those horrible feelings and thoughts and experiences, they weren't being dampened down like they used to. And so as, you know, I continued to try and medicate those feelings, and, you know, I'd have to go and keep kind of leveling up in usage, in amounts, in different substances, different kind of concoctions, just to kind of like, yeah, try and quiet it down again. And I think that's where it kind of progressed for me, was that it was the, you know, it's that internal thing again where it's like nothing was solving it anymore, and I had to see that I needed to reach out for help to have that, you know, to start having those things solved. But, you know, around feelings and experiences and stuff, you know, I have, you know, friends who are in recovery as well, and you know, they had kind of a beautiful childhood with no major, you know, disruptions or traumas or anything, and yet, you know, they were still alcoholics and addicts. And me, I had quite a traumatic, difficult upbringing. Both parents, you know, struggling with alcoholism and addiction, and then but me and that friend have still ended up in the same boat. So I think, you know, alcoholism and addiction can affect anyone.
Yeah, it doesn't distinguish.
No, and it's not, it's, what's the word? It doesn't, what's the word? It doesn't, like, it doesn't go, right, I'm going to pick you and you and you and that's it. But everyone else, you're all right. It kind of, it's not specific to race, it's not specific to where you were born, how you were born, who you were born. It's not relative to, you know, kind of financial status or anything. It's not about whether you're religious or not, or whether you're, you know, you're a king or anything.
Yeah.
It's, you know, anyone can be kind of affected by alcoholism and addiction, and I think that's where a lot of people get quite confused or upset around it, is that I think it's mainly confusion, that it's like, but, you know, I have a really good life, I've had a really good life, or you know, or I'm not like them, or I'm more like them. Why have I, you know, why has this happened to me? And it's like, it doesn't discriminate.
Yeah.
There we go, that's the word. All of that, I got there in the end. But yeah, it does not discriminate. It doesn't, alcoholism and addiction does not care who you are. You know, it just is. And I think that's something that a lot of people, I think through this podcast, will see and will be able to kind of, you know, engage in more, is that it's like, you know, it's not specific to kind of to any one type of person.
And I think just listening to you, it's, you know, there's, you know, as I think about it, there are certain characteristics in people and certain events in their lives, certain traumas, certain kind of mental health characteristics that can increase the susceptibility. Speed
it along.
To want to kind of, or to need to drink to numb yourself. You know, people, you know, with anxiety, you know, depression, people, you know, trauma. But then there's also, I think, those people that kind of, you know, go to school and they do really well at school. Not to put it in a box, but just as a kind of description.
Yeah.
And it's kind of achieving things throughout your life. And I think I sometimes notice people can achieve things and have an expectation that they're going to feel a certain way once they've achieved it. And there can be this kind of subtle disappointment or this kind of emptiness, this internal emptiness that's very difficult to know how to navigate. You know, it's like, you know, it's like akin to sitting down and having a meal, but not getting full.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you're hungry. You know, you want to eat something, but it's not filling you up. It's not impacting you in the way you need it to, and that can be extremely confusing for lots of people, particularly if they've committed so much of their time. And I think, you know, talking about traumas and stuff, you know, often when I think about trauma, I often, you know, assimilate it to, you know, childhood events and things, you know, growing up but in adult life and just going through life, there's lots of different things that cause trauma and the feeling of trauma.
Definitely. And like what you're saying about the person kind of, you know, constantly striving for, you know, in education to kind of fill some kind of void or to, you know, to have that desperate need to kind of achieve and do really well and kind of prove themselves. You know, I think there's also qualities in that. Like you said, it, you know, once that achievement's been reached, what now? Where do I go now? What can I do now? And you're kind of left with, I've got all of these qualifications and all of this kind of behind me, but, you know, I'm lost. And I think it's, you know, that point that people can get to, I think, is similar to someone who, you know, doesn't go through schooling in the same way, or, you know, leaves early and kind of is on kind of more of like a free path of, you know, kind of how I was. You know, I didn't enjoy education. I found it really challenging, and so it was like I just kind of went into work and was changing jobs a lot. But I feel like after chasing all those jobs and chasing money, essentially, when it came to, I feel like I was probably at a similar point, just with less qualifications, you know. But I think being in a world where qualifications and money mean so much, it can sometimes seem like, well, they've got a lot more opportunities than you do. But that's, again, for me, that's all external. That's not internal. You can still feel the same feelings. And then what you were saying about trauma, and instantly for me, when I think of trauma, I think about childhood trauma, or trauma kind of carried down from parents or grandparents, family members, or siblings or whatever. But then I think sometimes we forget that just being a human being, an adult human being, where there's all these expectations and kind of unspoken rules, through that there can be a lot of trauma. There can be a lot of smaller instances where you're knocked back, where I think life can be really, really, really hard.
Yeah,
brutal. And like you can see things and experience things that, just because 100 million other people have experienced it, or they've experienced worse, you kind of okay, I'll just brush it off and move along and just continue chugging along. And it's like, actually that's where I think in kind of independent feeling comes into play a lot, where it's like if something makes you feel upset or a specific type of feeling, I think it's important to kind of realize that, okay, that's how you feel and that's okay, and like nobody can tell you how you feel. And I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge those difficulties, not kind of wallow in them, which I am so wonderfully capable of doing. Love it. But like just finding a place to be like, I acknowledge that and I see that, and I'm going to deal with it positively, and for me, like I was saying, I've in childhood, in teenage life, in young adult, and now where I am, throughout that time, there's been, severe trauma that was, repeated and really, really difficult. And I think, some people might go, well, that's why you're an addict. That's why you're an alcoholic. That's why you've chosen these, kind of, disruptive, kind of difficult pathways, is because, of course you would. And it's like, well, for me, I don't blame any of them for my addiction. I just say that they kind of, fueled the fire a little bit. I used them as kind of more, this is going to sound quite harsh probably, but I used them more as an excuse to continue my kind of rampage with drugs and alcohol. It was kind of like, if you'd been what if you'd seen what I'd seen, if you'd been through what I'd been through, you'd be doing this, you'd be acting like this as well. And that's, it's a really sad and lonely place to be, but it's also very dangerous.
Well, and sometimes I think if there is something that's happened, like for example, I heard the other day that losing a job, or having a relationship breakup with someone that you really care about, something breaking down, having to relocate, these can feel like bereavements, like genuine bereavements that take some people like an extremely long time to get over and recover from. It can feel so defeating and rejecting, and it's traumatic, for lots of people. Not in every case, but in lots of cases. What do I do now? Where do I go? I had so many plans. I had so much kind of placed on this, and now it's gone. And it's not there, and it's confusing, and it's all it's awful. It's tragic. And sometimes that feeling as you get older, can be something you just have to kind of manage on your own. You know, it's like you don't get an awful lot of, I think the sympathy tends to kind of die down the older you get. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you've lost a job, just get another one.
Brush it off.
Yeah, like, oh, there's more fish in the sea, or like, just get another house. But to that person, their heart's broken. They're broken inside. Like, something's really hurt them.
Yeah.
And that feeling can if you can't quite get it out, it can fester, and it can manifest, and it can grow and develop into something, you know, into a behaviour, into something that's quite damaging.
Yeah, and I think like having that, for me, the way I see it is, you know, when I decided, or when it was kind of shown to me that, you know, I could live sober, I could live clean, and that was kind of, you know, a pathway for me to go down. You know, I always think kind of before that, it felt like my insides were kind of, you know, like gooey and sticky and like tar, you know, and from all the kind of damage that had happened to me, but that I'd also done to myself, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And I think, you know, it's through and only through having kind of sobriety as my base, as my kind of my foundation, that then I'm able to actually go inside and start kind of removing this goo, you know, like it's, but I know that, you know, I tried to do that when I was drinking and using. I tried to go to, you know, I'd go to therapists, I'd go to my doctor and be like, I need help, I'm so depressed, I'm so low, and, you know, and all these kind of suicidal thoughts and things, and the first thing, or one of the first things they'd always ask me is, how much are you drinking? How you know, are you taking drugs? And I'd always get so upset about that, you know. I think, but that's not a problem. Like, it's what's going on inside that's making me, you know, drink and use. I need help with that. But you know, as medical professionals, they said, you know, we are unable to assess you or help you until you find a solution to your drinking drug use, and then, since finding that solution, you know, or having that solution kind of sucker punched at me, you know, I've been able to build a foundation of staying clean and sober, and having recovery and starting to kind of build life back in, that only now, with no chemicals inside me of, you know, of drugs and alcohol, that I'm able to go to these services and they're able to help, and then I'm able to kind of start, you know, removing that goo and start kind of becoming healthier again. And it's not just physical health, you know, it's, for me, it's more about, you know, my mental health, my emotional well-being, and my spiritual health, you know, and that for me has just completely changed my life. That, and I think, you know, someone, you know, if someone is feeling like they're too broken, or they're too, you know, I felt so rotten inside. If you're feeling so rotten and like, you know, there's no hope, even the doctors won't help me, stuff like that, it's, you know, you're never too rotten, you're never too broken, you know. You can always find a solution, and there always is one, and you don't have to be, you know, crying on your bed like I was, looking at, you know, death or death. It doesn't have to be like that. You can just be at a place where you think, I don't want to feel like this anymore. and I don't want my life to deteriorate, you know. And I think, you know, coming in young has shown me that, kind of coming into living a sober and clean life young has shown me that, you know, number one, you know, alcohol and drug use can really speed up your demise really quickly. It doesn't have to be, you know, over decades, but also that, you know, you don't have to completely annihilate your life and your physical health before before you're able to get help.
I think it's a great point that you're making. You know, sobriety, you know, recovery, abstinence. When you go into it, there are so many wonderful lessons that you learn just about life. You know, there's wonderful virtues that you know are taught. You know, being honest and humble. You know, and non-judgmental, and being a part of a community and sharing and giving back, and just wonderful qualities and teachings that come with it. And it makes me think, and I wanted to ask, do you think sobriety, it might sound a bit silly me even asking this, but do you think sobriety or recovery is just for people that have alcohol and drug problems?
No, I think if you're finding, if someone is finding that, you know, their alcohol and drug use is creating consequences in their life or difficulties in their life, and they, you know, want to kind of find a solution to that, find a way of kind of, you know, stopping those consequences happening. I think, you know, seeking help to either, you know, trying to control it, or seeking help in kind of, doing a detox, or finding a rehabilitation place where you can go and kind of and seek some help and guidance around it.
But like, if someone was just sad, let's say, and they don't really have like a drink or drugs problem, because it's weird, because, you know, when you think about the communities and you think about recovery, you know, I think somebody that doesn't really consider themselves an alcoholic or a drug addict, but is desperately sad and lonely and doesn't know what to do or where to go or how to engage with something that might carry some meaning for them. This community of recovery provides that. Do you think that would benefit a person?
I think so.
Yeah.
But, you know, like I say that, you know, I have my sobriety recovery, you know, my living sober recovery. Then I also have my recovery around, you know, for example, an eating disorder. I also have recovery around, you know, mental health conditions, where all of those recoveries need to be managed. And I think, so if someone is, you know, really depressed and really low and really struggling with life, it is about finding a recovery plan. You know, I think recovery is accessible for everyone in any kind of way that they need help in. You know, I think, well, it's like if you go to, you know, if you're having financial issues, you'd go to a financial advisor, or you'd go to, you know, your bank, or you'd go to kind of, I know the council do specific things, you know, you'd go and you'd discuss and you'd work out a plan of you know, figuring out how to manage your money better and how to recover, you know, whether you're in loads of debt, how to kind of recuperate that debt and recover from it, and then you'd have a plan for that. And I think it's the same with mental, physical. If you've broken your leg really badly, or you've got a bad back from continuous labour, you know, you'd go to your doctor and they'd go, okay, let's work out a recovery plan for you, you know, go and see a physiotherapist. That physiotherapist will then give you a plan of you need to do this every week or every day, do some stretches, you know, and that is a plan in itself. It's like all of these are recovery plans. It's just with, you know, alcoholism and drug addiction, it's because it's called recovery quite consistently, and that's kind of its label, that it's assumed that, okay, well, that's the only recovery plan, you know, but it's like, no, there's loads of different type of recovery plans, and for me, you know, once I was able to get sober and clean, then my kind of, along with my kind of sober living, my recovery plan for, you know, my mental health and my mental well-being came into play. Yeah. So, you know, I went to my doctor, I reached out to other people around me that I knew had similar things going on, whether then or in the past. But yeah, I think I went to my doctor, I spoke to her, and we figured out a plan. I was on waiting list, you know, there are loads of things in place that are there for you to use, and sometimes you might have to wait, you know, I had to wait a year for therapy, but, you know, in that time I learnt a lot, and there were still loads of organisations that were able to keep me plodding along that little plan until I was able to kind of start my mental health recovery with therapy. Yeah. And I think, you know, again, I think with depression and anxiety and stuff like that, and mental health issues, it can be very isolating. The same as kind of addiction, it can be very isolating, and you can feel really alone, and nobody feels the way I do, and I'm, you know, I've never felt this bad, and it's, you know, that's a lie that I have told myself, you know, and it's when you reach out for help and you ask for help, that is the first step in alleviating, you know, something, you know, it's when you kind of concede and kind of go, you know, I need help, and then, you know, you can, there is always an organisation, another human being, there is always, you know, someone there to kind of catch you and help you, and, you know, I think a lot of people get quite scared about mental health stuff because they think, oh, I'm too far gone, or I'm too, same with addiction, I'm too far gone, you know, nobody's going to be able to help me. And I think, you know, why are doctors there then? Why are therapists there? You know, let them help you. And, you know, when I first got sober, I had a really, really intense mental health breakdown episode, whatever you want to call it, and I went kind of fully fledged into psychosis, you know, clean and sober, which I never thought was possible, and you know, I was held by services, you know, by crisis teams, by, you know, nurses and doctors and inpatient facilities, you know, I was held by them, and they kind of eased me into this recovery journey, you know, which was alongside my sobriety journey, and that's not saying like if you get clean and sober you'll have like a fully fledged mental breakdown. That's not what I'm saying. But that's just my story, in that, you know, whatever level you think you're at, there is someone that can help you, and there are facilities that can help you. It's not just drug and alcohol facilities, you know, dry houses or clinics or things like that. It's not just for alcohol and drug abuse, or you know, it's not just for rehabilitation for major injuries, you know. There's a lot of stuff out there for kind of the internal, the, you know, how there is for spiritual things, you know. There's, you know, we're so lucky in the UK and in Bristol as well to have, in the southwest, or you know, to have so many different kind of spiritualities and religions and things like that, that like, you know, it's the same for spiritual condition. You're able to seek out and find those things and find a path, or find your own path within them all, you know. And it's the same for mental health. You know, it's the same for that kind of emotional and mental well-being, is that it's like how alcoholism and addiction is internally, you know, it's invisible to some extent, you know. It's the same with kind of mental health and stuff. It's like these hidden or invisible illnesses, or whatever you want to call them, they're just as important as physical ones, and that there's all these routes to go down, you know. I am proof.
Yeah, and I think we're many parts, you know, of one thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I like what you're saying, because, you know, there's many different types of pathways to help with the varying different parts within us, and it's never usually just one thing. Maybe it starts with the one thing, you know, and then once you kind of do that, then you can start looking at the other things, and it just kind of evolves quite naturally like that. And like listening to you, that's what I'm hearing. It's kind of, you know, you dealt with the initial issue, and then suddenly by doing that you were able to look at all the other bits and find the different methods that are out there to deal with them. And it sounds like you don't place too much emphasis on one singular thing.
No.
You know, which I think is really good advice, and it's true. You know, it's a balance.
Yeah.
You know, I think there has to be you know, there has to be different outlets for us to engage in.
Definitely. For me, I know that, you know, I have, you know, I know that there's kind of, I have to see the broader view of where I need help, or where I kind of need guidance in my life. But the main thing for me, kind of going back, is that, you know, without recovery and without a kind of living a sober, clean life, I can have none of that other stuff, and I'm unable to look at any of that other stuff. That's why I have to have, for me, you know, I have to have that as the principle, the base, my foundation, my, you know, I've described it like this before, it's like bricks, you know. If I start, you know, that has to be my foundation, my recovery, and what I do for that recovery has, you know, a brick. Each thing has a brick, and, you know, if I start removing one or two of those bricks, my foundation's looking a little shaky. But if all my things are lined up nice and I'm doing all the things I need to do to, you know, stay clean and sober today, then today I'm able to look at the broader aspects of life, you know, because when I was drinking and using, like you said, all bets were off, nothing, like I couldn't help myself, but also nobody was able to help me because, you know, I was, number one, under the influence all the time, and you know, it's very challenging trying to really get through to someone that's on drugs and alcohol. But also, you know, number two, it was that, you know, I was in another world. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't grounded. I had no idea of what it was that I actually needed.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, yeah, but through recovery and through kind of not, you know, pumping myself through with drugs and alcohol 24/7, I've been able to go and look at life, which, you know, I'm not gonna lie to you, it has not been plain sailing. Like, you know, I think at first I thought, well, I'm gonna, you know, get sober and clean and then everything will be rosy and amazing, and that hasn't been the case. Don't get me wrong, I'm so grateful to be clean and sober, but it's, you know, I think we forget that life is challenging. Full stop. For anyone and everyone. It has its ups and downs, and I think, you know, all of that trauma from the past that I've been kind of shoving down, it's going to come up. And also, all the kind of trauma I caused myself from drinking and using for so long, you know, that's going to take a while to kind of repair the relationship with myself, to trust myself again, to trust other people, to trust life, you know. And I think it takes a while, and, you know, at 2 years, you know, I don't see that as kind of like a massive feat of you know, sobriety time, because, you know, I think it's where I'm at today. Yeah, it's miles off where I was 2 years ago, but I know that there's a lot more to unpick, to do, you know, and whilst doing that, life comes back into play, and that's a wonderful thing. It's not
a straight line.
No, it's never linear. It's never like that. It's, you know, I've had, you know, days where it's like I'm unable to leave the house, you know, and I just think, you know, I think, oh, I'm going backwards, I'm not, you know, what am I doing wrong? And it's like, some days I just want to be inside, and I just want to be at home, or, you know, some days I want to be out all day. I think it's really important to accept the day as it is, and accept how you feel that day for what it is, and not kind of catastrophize. Not saying that I'm able to just be like, let's not catastrophize today, but, you know, I think it's saying a lot that, you know, I got sober and clean to live. I don't have a choice in, I believe, I don't have a choice in the way, you know, everybody else lives, the way my life is going to pan out. I have some say, some choice in it, but ultimately, you know, I got sober to live. However that looked, whatever happened, you know, that's all I wanted, was to live clean and sober, full stop. I didn't, you know, I didn't go, oh, I want to be clean and sober to, you know, become, you know, a princess. It was like...
Well, and I think it's interesting the point you made about leaving the house. and also for me, I have days like that, and sometimes I get a bit confused because I think, well, I'm clean and sober, you know, and I've been exercising, I'm eating well, I'm doing I'm doing all the things. Why am I feeling this? And sometimes it can be a bit confusing. You know, it's like I should be feeling. But then, you know, when you kind of like sit down and you don't then just go and run off and drink on it or use on it, but you actually just kind of sit with it, you do kind of realise that life, you know, a lot of the time is kind of lived in the grey, you know, in that kind of middle place.
Yeah.
You know, you're not, you know, going 1,000 miles an hour, you're not down on the floor, you know, and it's trying to find peace and contentment in those moments.
Yeah.
You know, and I think sobriety as just another lesson that it helps with is that it's, you know, it's kind of helping you learn to live, you know, in that kind of middle ground and be at peace with that and content with it.
Yeah.
It's okay not to want to go outside. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just one of those days, and that's okay. Enjoy it. Just be at peace with it. You know, whereas you don't have to go to that next level with it.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be this massive extreme. I think I was speaking to a friend about it this morning actually, and just saying, like, you know, we used to live our lives in such extremes, you know, it was either desperately low or extremely high, you know, and it was always chasing kind of, you know, that to get out of yourself. It was always chasing this kind of desperate need to be happy or joyful permanently. And, you know, for any human being, alcoholic, addict or not, that is unattainable, I believe. I think because, you know, it's about living life on life's terms. It's about living life and kind of rolling with it and realising that, you know, not every day is going to be sunshine and rainbows, you know, and just kind of not trying to constantly strive for happiness, because in my belief, just as sadness is, and just as disappointment is and fear is, for me happiness is fleeting. It comes and goes, you know, but contentment, that's what I strive for today, is just that middle road. And it took me a really long time to kind of accept that, and still some days I don't, and I think, hang on, like you said, I'm doing all the things and I'm really healthy and well, and I'm, you know, I should be just like so happy and wanting to, like, you know, run down the road singing, but it's like, actually, no, I just want to be in bed today and just like watch YouTube and just like nap a lot, and like that in itself is okay, you know. And I think, that, like we were saying about that grey area, is that it's just that contentment. It's just that, and being at peace with it, that, you know, if someone was low, I'd give them the advice in probably nicer terms, but, you know, it's up and down. It ebbs and flows. It will change, you know. This will pass. This sadness, but, you know, when we're in this grey area, we think, oh, it's wrong, it's bad, you know, I need to either be happy or sad, or I need to have some kind of, you know, something needs to be going on, some excitement or some, you know, disaster, or something needs to be happening. And it's like, for me, what I try and say to myself and kind of those around me is that, you know, that grey area, that kind of middle contentment, for me, that's life. And the kind of, and that contentment and that grey will come and go just as the happiness will. It's just this baseline, you know.
And the highs and the lows that you were talking about, I was speaking to a therapist a couple of weeks ago. And she made the point that, you know, going through heavy using and drinking, particularly if you've done it for a very prolonged period of time, what you've experienced are just these, like if you consider it like a heartbeat, you're just going you're going very high and you're going to these crashing lows. And that's what your expectation is. Even when you get sober. So it's very confusing to be in a grey area because you've never, like the person's never really gone there or experienced it. You're expecting, you know, to either be on your bed in tears or kind of, like you said, running down the street singing, but to not be either of those, it can be difficult to navigate or know what to do or know where to go because it feels so foreign. And she made the point that when a person comes into sobriety, that's why in lots of cases sobriety does take a couple of years, because your nervous system, like your brain, your neurological pathways, you know, your memory, your expectations of it just takes time to just readjust to normality. And like you said, that grey contentment, it sounds boring and it sounds, you know, like the grey area, but that's kind of normality. You know, that place.
That's life. That's where a lot of people are at, you know, and I think it's, and like, you know, like as you were saying, as your therapist was saying, kind of, you know, that's what we're used to, it's kind of ingrained in us. So when there is this, I was literally speaking about this exact same thing this morning with a friend, like, you know, she's sitting in this grey area at the moment, this kind of just lifeless, nothing desperately sad's going on, nothing extremely exciting's going on, it's just life, and it's okay. That's the thing. But you know, as I've done, as she's doing, it's that kind of panic then that happens that goes, hang on, this can't be right, something terrible must be going on, you know, or because that's, for me, that was always my immediate. It was never, oh, something exciting must be going on somewhere. It was always something terrible is going to happen. Do
you think that takes a lot of people out the door?
Yeah.
Because if they're just in that place for too long, they're like, look, this isn't fun. Like this is, I need to feel. I need to go on to that high point.
Well, it's because you've lived in chaos for so long, and it's such intense chaos. But then coming out of that and just being like, oh, you know, that's why I think sitting with it and trying to just like be with that can be so difficult, but it's so important, because then that can, you know, keep you, you know, going for the rest of your life, clean and sober. You know, if you're able to sit in that kind of ness, like that kind of, because
make it work.
And I think that's why a lot of people kind of, you know, leave sobriety or relapse or struggle desperately, because in that, you know, in that kind of contentment grey, it feels unnerving. Because it's like, hang on, this doesn't feel right, I'm not used to this, it feels wrong. And so maybe then, as I've done in the past, you know, I act out, I'll cause something to stir up, you know, and then in turn, like, in the end, then making some kind of massive low or massive high, you know? And ultimately, all I've done is just prolong, you know, or pause or cause issue in my recovery journey.
You know, talking about it, because I think this is fascinating, but I think talking about it, it almost feels like that desire is very much kind of programmed into our DNA. Like it's very much a part of being a human being, you know, wanting, like pushing, you know, why do people climb Mount Everest? You know, why do they sail around, why do we go into, it's that kind of, that desire for exploration, that desire to push and go to that high point, go to that extreme place. And I think, you know, in some respects, without that, you know, maybe as a species, we wouldn't have done a lot of the things that we've done. It's like, it's a beautiful part of us. But obviously, there are ways that it's kind of obtained you know, you could say in a positive way, and there are ways that it's entailed in a
Yeah.
negative, but it's that kind of desire to escape the grey.
Yeah.
You know, to escape the normality. You know, it's like a strong kind of fiendish appetite in some way.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, like you know, I hear a lot of the time people doing these incredible kind of feats. You know, running. There's that guy that running the length of Africa, and there's people that kind of go in a boat and just row, you know, wherever, like just. But like, you know, there's that strong kind of
trying to get out of yourself. But
yeah.
I think it's that trying to, like, getting that extreme high and almost feeling so connected to everything with that extreme happiness or that extreme, you know, joy. And I think, you know, if life was consistently that kind of middle ground, you know, I think it would be quite boring, let's be honest. But I think there's, for me, as the type of addict, alcoholic person I am, I always have to take that too far. It's never enough.
Yeah.
The building's never high enough. The money's never enough. You know, it's the relationship's never good enough. It's all of that. It's about always wanting more and needing more and never being
satisfied.
Yeah, and I think, and that's where a lot of addiction comes in. Not just alcohol and drugs, but you know, all the other different forms of addiction that comes in. You know, what I get is never enough, and I always want more. You know,
and it's exhausting.
It's exhausting, and it's, you know, it really, well, you know, it can. It's just so dangerous in any type of addiction, you know. But I think, for me, I think that's why today, in my sobriety, in my sober life, sounds really silly and really like, are you okay? But I just want mundane. I just want no extremes.
Yeah.
You know, I don't get that, unfortunately, because it's life, like, you know, but I'm happy when my day is just like, you know, nothing major, nothing too, it's like, because for me, personally, I know that if I have those massive highs, I know what is waiting for me down there, and I think that's why I'm just like, mundane. You know, just you know, run-of-the-mill life, please. Because I've done that kind of madness, that, you know, all that travel, all of that kind of just insanity around everything in life. Relationships, food, you know, friendships, everything. And so it just, today I'm just like, bit of the mundane, please. And
have you found you know, that appetite? Have you found it kind of manifesting in other ways? Like, do you have you found yourself like shopping online more? Have you found yourself like, I don't know,
replacing my addiction for something else that's, I wouldn't call an addiction, but as the behaviour when it comes up is similar. Like, you know, I mean, I think shopping's just a classic. You know, like I'll go through periods of time where it's, I'm having a low and I'm feeling really kind of distressed, and it's that kind of like, but nothing's really wrong, but I'm just low. I'm just depressed, you know, there's no rhyme or reason, you know, and so of course my immediate thing will be quick fix, you know, and that can be shopping, that can be sugar is a massive one for me, huge, like, you know, just because it gives me that immediate release of kind of endorphins, of joy, of, you know, but like with, you know, a lot of quick fixes in life, is quick.
And there's a lot of those around us
so
these
many.
days. You know, all you need to do is pick up your phone.
Well, it's social media,
And
like I was
you've
saying.
got likes, social media, you've got views, you've got little games that you can play, you've got Deliveroo.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes just flicking through Deliveroo and picking something, it's like, oh, now I feel better.
Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, the amount of times, you know, and it arrives and it's like,
it's not,
you know, you feel a bit, you feel a bit sick afterwards, but not all the time, but yeah, so a lot of those kind of quick fixes, those distractions, there are so many of those now, and I've really kind of picked up on that being sober, because I use a lot of them, you know, exercise games,
is a massive one.
Yeah, a lot of them.
And like, I think the things that I've seen, you know, trip people up or harm people the most is relationships.
Yeah.
That's a huge one, because, you know, I think, I don't know, for me, when I was, you know, out in the madness of kind of active alcoholism and addiction, relationships just kind of came hand in hand with that, weirdly, and that it was just chaotic and messy. And so when I kind of became sober and clean, I had no idea of what a healthy relationship looked like, you know. And I'm talking about kind of, you know, intimate relationship. And you know, I for a long portion of my recovery, I had to be really careful around that and kind of being like, no, like I'm not getting involved with anyone, because it was terrifying, because I knew that, you know, in the past, all of kind of relationships and kind of ex-partners and stuff, it was so, there was always such a level of toxicity, and I'm not just saying that about them, it's you know, it's a 50-50 thing, you know. It wasn't just them, but I think, you know, when I came in, it's kind of this thing to do, because it is a quick fix. It's that immediate attention, you know, it's that immediate kind of, just kind of, you know, attraction, and you know, that's what we as humans do. But it's just like, for me, I just think I've learnt a lot from the women around me, you know, that are kind of further on in their sobriety journey. You know, they've been sober for decades, and you know, they've given me incredible advice, you know, around that, of just being like, you have your life ahead of you. It doesn't matter whether you're, you know, 21 or whether you're 51. There's time. Like, just like, hold horses and give yourself a chance. Like, I always think, if me and that person are meant to be, it'll be.
Yeah.
Right now, also, a person that I went to a lot for advice, I remember one of the first things she said to me was just like, what have you got to bring to the table? And I was like, oh, how dare you? But actually it's true. You know, I was, 30 days sober, my life was a mess, but that's all kind of external. Internally, I was even worse, you know? What did I actually have to offer to that?
Yeah.
And ultimately, realistically, all it is bodies. That's it.
Well,
it's really, personally, that's my opinion. I think it's so important, just give yourself a chance, you know?
The love, the intimacy, the validation,
validation.
the attention, these are all things that we want, you know. And I think it is particularly dangerous for people, kind of particularly in early recovery, because there's still that kind of void in there, I think, sometimes. and I think it can be quite instinctual to reach for another person to fill that. And if you do that too quickly, it ends up becoming basically another drug. It becomes another crux. That person becomes your drug, and you haven't really taken the time to heal.
Yeah.
You know, and it's important to do that. But in saying that, I totally understand, you know, why people do it.
100%.
You know, and why it's because it is quite common, and it takes a lot of people out the doors, because a lot of the time they never work.
No.
If someone gets into a relationship in early recovery, a lot of the time they just don't work, and it ends up being an absolute disaster, and it causes really so much pain.
Yeah, and like, you know, if I didn't have those strong women around me, you know, kind of guiding me, and ultimately just kind of dragging me away, you know, I would have done the same thing, because I'm a human being. Ultimately.
Yeah.
It's just on top of that, I'm an addict and alcoholic who, you know, loves a quick fix. And I just think that's why, you know, when we first started talking, we were talking, you know, you mentioned community. That's why having such a strong community around you is so important. And some people think, oh, how can I do that? I don't know anyone. I've isolated my friends and my family. It is possible, like, because you have something so deeply in common with, you know, another for me, another woman in recovery. I have so much in common with them that, you know, the bond is incredible. And then those bonds add up, you know, and you meet new people, you know, and you expand that community, that circle around you, and, you know, they hold you through it just as you hold them. It's like kind of like you know, like, you know, when people lie, they do that thing where you like lie back and you lie on someone, and then you lie, so you make like a table, but you don't know how, because it's like you're just all kind of like floating. It's kind of like that. Yeah. You're just all kind of holding each other. And sometimes some people need a bit more holding. And it's just, but through that, I found that I'm able to go to these people for advice, for guidance, you know, and because they have been through more life than I have, and more sober life than I have, they will have almost definitely gone through these experiences, and so they're able to kind of give me their advice and their suggestions on what to do or how to deal with situations. But yeah, I think with relationships and stuff, and I just think, give yourself a chance, love yourself, you know, instead of trying to put, you know, force, you know, or you know, love someone else in that type of intimate relationship way. You know, it's about learning to start loving yourself and building that relationship back up with yourself, you know, and keep putting yourself on kind of a sure footing to then, you know.
Well, I hear a lot, like putting recovery first. I hear that a lot. You know, put your sobriety first, just for a while, just for a little bit. You know, and when you hear it like that, you know, it's like, yeah, okay, fair enough, that's doable. But it does take a lot of discipline.
100%.
And yeah, you gotta connect with people to kind of help maybe with that kind of distraction.
Yeah.
Because no, it's an excellent point. It is.
Yeah, and it's putting recovery first, but you know, it's not just like, oh, I'll just put recovery first, like, oh, I just won't be sad today. It's like that. It's not like that. But you're gonna make mistakes. I made mistakes. I will, again, the ultimate, I'm a human being, you know. I will continue to make mistakes throughout my whole recovery, whether I'm 2 years or a million, you know. It's like, it's about making those mistakes and learning from them, but it's also about acknowledging that could be a mistake, and then asking someone else, is that a mistake? Or, you know, how would you deal with this situation? Or, you know, asking for help doesn't just stop, you know, once you're sober. It's continually kind of having that willingness to reach out for help and to be honest about why you need that help.
Well, and it's a hard ask. Like I've got a tremendous amount of sympathy for this, because you start to get better. You know, you decide to get well. You stop drinking. You're sober. You know, maybe you go to treatment. You detox. You go through a lot of stuff, and then suddenly, you know, maybe you're in a supported house. Maybe you're living with other people, and you're sober and you're living, and you feel better. You've got clarity. Physically, you feel better. You're not. And the instinct is to start running. You know, it's to just start running and go bananas and just kind of get it all back. You know, and you've got this like kind of insatiable appetite, and then all you hear around you is just slow it down. You know, slow it down. You can't have that. You can't do that. It's like a starving, hungry person that's kind of in a cake shop, but they're not allowed any cake.
Because if you're starved, like, you know, when you see a starving dog, and you have to feed them slowly. You have to give it in increments, in little bits, bit by bit. Yeah. Because if you give them loads, they'll eat it all up and they'll get sick. Yeah. And that's, I think, a perfect kind of analogy, if that's the right word, for early recovery. Is like, you know, you've destroyed yourself in whatever shape or form that takes for you. You know, just drip feed life back for you, you know? And because if you rush it all in, you try and do everything all at once, there's a really, really strong possibility you're going to get sick again.
Well, you'll slip, you slip or you lapse, and it happens all the time. It happens a lot, you know. It's and it can be extremely dangerous, slips and lapses.
Yeah.
You know, who knows where it takes you?
Well, yeah, it's playing with life, isn't it? Ultimately.
I mean, I talked about kind of it's a good area, it's a good topic of conversation. I'm really interested by the conversation of slips and lapsing, relapsing. I know it's quite a delicate subject, because I think that depending upon which community you're involved in, or kind of what pathway in recovery you've chosen. There are different schools of thought, and you know, some people like it's like, no, it can never happen, and if that ever happens, I'm basically dead. Or you can go back into a state of psychosis. It can start a 3-year bender which you kind of don't recover from. It can be exceptionally dangerous, but then there's other people that do have a slip or a lapse, and they leave it there and they kind of get back into. And I've always thought slips and lapses are a big part of it, because it's not perfect and it's not linear, and you do make mistakes, and I've always appreciated when I've come across someone that said that's okay, you know, that's okay. Yeah. You know, it doesn't mean that the house is closed to you now. No. You know, okay, you know, you had a bad day, like you messed up, you made a mistake, you know, I understand. But I think sometimes it can feel like that level of kind of sympathy or understanding, so sometimes it isn't there. Yeah. And it can be if a person comes back and go, I've just slipped and I've lapsed, sometimes the door does get closed. And I've always found that quite upsetting in a sense, because at that point, that's when you really need some love. Yeah. You know.
But I think that door might close, but there is another door.
Yeah.
You know, and I think with, you know, relapsing, I think it is important to talk about, because it is a part of a lot of people's journeys. Yeah. You know, when I first came into sobriety, it was 3.5 months in, and then I relapsed. And it was thankfully for just 3 days, but you know, it really took me back. But I think, you know, some people can relapse and it can, you know, 10 years and then they come back, you know, and it can be extreme or really challenging. I mean, it's really challenging whether it's an hour or a day or, you know, 10 years, it's still as challenging. But I think the brutality around the kind of shutting those doors down to people that have relapsed is, I think it is a very difficult topic to talk about, because in some ways it seems so brutal and so like, oh my God, how could you do that to another human being? Like, you know, they're an alcoholic addict, like there's a high chance they would relapse, you know. But then I also believe that it's circumstantial. It's based on, you know, on each individual. But then I also think, you know, the type of addict and alcoholic I am, I can be very manipulative and I can be very cunning and you know, weasel my way in a lot. And I think sometimes, what do they say, tough love, I hate that, but like, you know, kind of that brutality is sometimes what people need to come to and, you know, find the avenue that they need. Like, you know, like you were saying about, you know, that door shutting, that doesn't mean that there aren't 5 other doors for them, you know. It's just now that they've got to go and find that, and they've got to be really willing to go and find that. And that sounds really harsh,